Welcome to the Man Up God's Way podcast, a show that dives into the real, raw, and relevant issues for men and their faith, life, and community. Now, your host, Jody Burkeen.
Hey guys, Jody Burkeen here with Man Up God's Way, and I want to welcome you to the Man Up God's Way podcast. You can check us out on iTunes, Spotify, as well as Google Play, and just about any podcast platform that is out there. I'm excited today. I've got a special guest here, and we're going to dive into a lot of really good stuff. So if you will, just welcome Brent McCorkle, who is the director of the new movie coming out, Jesus Revolution, and many more. Brent, how you doing, brother?
Man, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, man.
Man, thank you so much for taking your time to just spend a little bit of moment with the folks at Man Up God's Way to tell your story and your passion behind movies. And I think once they start hearing some of the movies that you've directed, that they'll go, oh, okay, I know who this guy is now, or at least know the movies. So a lot of times directors are in the background and don't necessarily get to come out to the foreground, but I appreciate you doing this. I love all your movies.
Thanks, man, dude. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, I love it. It's a tough business to work in, but it's very rewarding work, especially when somebody that maybe needed a little something, or they're moved by your film, they come find you and tell you, that your work meant something to them. That's very rewarding.
I could imagine. Imagine, man. That is so cool. So before we jump into your movies, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story? Kind of where you came from, how you got into the business, when and how you met Jesus, and kind of run down that path for your testimony, so our folks can just try to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure. I feel blessed to have been raised by a loving Christian set of parents. They loved me well, and they raised me in the church. I was baptized when I was 5. So I was the Sunday school kid. I went to church 5 times a week. My dad became a pastor, and we pioneered a church in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. And we left everything we knew to start the church from scratch, just with me and my brother and my mom and my dad. And that was in the Arlington, Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas area. Wow. In the early 80s. And so I grew up seeing my dad really chase a dream that he had, and also have a lot of setbacks and failures. And it was just a beautiful thing to watch him go through it and just have a passion for this thing that he felt like he was supposed to do. So I think that was one of the greatest things my dad instilled in me, was just seeing a man chase his dreams really hard. And I've done that in my life as well. So that was a gift. And then the other big gift I had growing up in the church, for sure, was there's such an emphasis on nurturing kids that are artistic in a lot of churches today. So if you watch shows like American Idol or America's Got Talent, so many of those kids got their 10,000 hours in because they were raised in church. So right. It's a nurturing, loving environment. And a lot of times we don't even realize we're artists. We have this creativity, and like, oh, we'll sing in the choir or sing on stage or play piano. Here's an instrument. Why don't you act in this play? And it's just this beautiful place to land, and you can fall flat on your face and make a lot of mistakes and you're still loved and right. And nurtured through all that. So I got my 10,000 hours in the church. I was a worship leader. I played piano and sang and learned other instruments. And I became the musician that I am today because of my time in the church. And I always try to remind people of that, that it's a wonderful training ground. It's almost like minor leagues or a AAA ball or something, like where you can really hone yourself. And if you're ready for the majors, you can do it. And so that was a huge thing for me. And then I was raised in a charismatic persuasion, and one thing I noticed even as a kid that I still think is so beautiful today, and if you watch my movies, you see it play out every time I do a movie. But when someone was hurting, maybe their wife left them, or they had cancer, or they had a child that was sick, or whatever it was, they would bring these people up to the front of the church, and all these people would gather around them and put hands on them, and that person would be crying, but the people around them would be weeping, like just in empathy and compassion, and crying out to God that their situation could change. But even their situation didn't change. It was one of the most loving, beautiful outpourings of like what I feel like God's love is. And there's all these people putting hands on this hurting person, and man, it made an indelible mark on me.
That's good.
In every movie I do, there will be some element of that in it. And so yeah, man, I think I think where I'm at now, there's no way I would be where I'm at now if I wasn't raised, number one, in a loving Christian home, number two, in a nurturing church environment that actually protected me as a little artist. I didn't even know I was an artist. I was creative. I was into all this stuff. And then, in my 20s, and I was really adrift, man. I was lost. I changed majors 5 times, like a typical artist, just not knowing. And then finally I figured this out about myself, and so I got married pretty young. I was still working at a church at the time, doing worship and drama and stuff, and married my lovely wife, and we had 5 kids, pretty close together. And in the midst of all that, I kind of got my life sorted out and decided I wanted to attend a film school and become a director. So the church graciously allowed me to stack all my work into Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and they let me go to school Tuesday, Thursdays. And so I was pursuing my film degree as I was working. So that was super cool of them to do. And then, and then we all knew that was where I wanted to go. So at some point I jumped and got into the film industry in Dallas, and there was a lot of commercials being made, and I just worked any job I could find. I mean, I had a mortgage and all those kids, and I was hungry, man. I was hungry. I was pounding the pavement. But on the weekends, I would run around with my friends. I would beg and borrow and steal cameras. I mean, I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, man. But I would, find someone that had a camera and be like, please, man, I'll come work for you for 4 hours for free, or whatever. And I'd barter.
Those are probably some of the best days of your life. It's like when you first get married and your date night is scrounging up $25 to go, grab a bite to eat, and now you spend $25 at McDonald's by yourself.
Man, that is so wise of you to say that, because you're exactly right. And I don't want to come across wrong, because I'm very grateful for where I've landed, but those were the best days. Running around, my wife would help me. I would throw my little kids, tiny kids, in my short films as actors, and every kid, got thrown into something. And all my friends, they weren't even into film, but I would convince them, like, this is gonna be so amazing. We're all gonna do this thing. We're gonna see it on the screen, and you're gonna love it. And then, but it's really weird. There's the same in filmmaking. There's that same hormone that women have when they give birth. It's like so painful, and they'd never do it again. And then right if they have the baby, that hormone hits. Right, I would do this again tomorrow. So I'm joking, but there's that same kind of vibe where you just hate it, and then you see your work on the screen. I mean, dude, we would kill everybody out there in the woods. One night we did a 30-hour day. I don't even know how we did it. We did a 30-hour day because I only had the equipment on loan for the weekend. I was like, guys, we have to shoot this whole thing. And we got behind. I mean, I remember walking in one time, people were just asleep on the floor, and I pushed everybody so hard. And I have mixed emotions about that. I think I probably pushed a little too hard, but even the people that were frustrated and sleep deprived and stuff, when they would see our film competing in a festival, and sometimes we would win, they would come up to me right after that screening and be like, let's do it again. When are we doing it? But yeah, those are the best days, man, because it was it was low risk, high reward. And I think what's happened to me, to be transparent and vulnerable, I think if you had some pro ball players on, they'd tell you something similar. It's like, oh man, I yearned for the street ball days with me and my friends in the neighborhood, when it didn't matter if you won or lost. But now, now there's just all this pressure on you to perform, and you know, you're talking about millions of dollars of risk, and
Right.
and that's all predicated upon your choices or lack thereof. And so, or at least it feels like that to a director.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, man, you're very wise to call it out, because I definitely like yearn for those kickball
Yeah.
days, you know, my filmmaking. So yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, the
Definitely.
process sucks, but the results are what, what keeps driving you, going through that. I remember the days when I was just, kind of I gave my life to the Lord in 2003 at 33 years old, and I had no clue what church, was about. And here I am starting to go to church and just learning the process and reading my Bible and trying to, get through that whole thing. And then God gave me this vision for Man Up God's Way, and wrote some books and, kind of did all that. And then I started traveling, and, next thing I know, I'm doing 20, 25 conferences a year, all the way up until COVID. And it was just like, man, I long for the days when I was just sitting in a Bible study, just gleaning from the word and encouraging guys. And now I'm, speaking, and it's like stressful. And, but, at the end, it's like, oh, okay, now I know what God's got me doing here. So
Yeah.
I feel you.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's okay. I mean, I can look back and remember those days and have a lot of nostalgia for those days. But the nostalgia for those days only happens because I grew out of that, and
Yes,
got a
exactly.
career, that kind of thing. And so yeah, I think it's great. I think it's great.
10 years from now, you'll be looking back and looking, oh, those were the days, those were the days. So,
But there's a spiritual issue there that I'm working on too, and there's something there that's broke. And I think most people feel this way, but I want to love and be grateful to the furthest extent for what's
right,
happening right now. Even if I ended up in a wheelchair or blinded or those horrible things, like
right.
I think trick is like, and you can look back fondly, fond memories, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I really am working on me right now, like making sure I'm having the correct
Yes.
amount of gratitude for the good things that are happening in my life and the lack of bad things. It's like,
Right.
man, for me to wake up this morning, like a billion biological processes had to go right.
Yeah, 100%. Yes,
So
exactly.
you wake up and, like, you stub your toe and you're like,
Right.
or whatever. It's like, come on, guys. So I'm definitely trying to work on that in my own life as well.
That is
But
great.
I'll sum it up. Making all the short films with my friends in the woods. We would compete. We put the shorts out, and the word got out there. And like some of them were good, some of them were terrible. A few of them were really good. And they would win.
Right.
But every time I went out, I got better. And my team got
That's
better.
awesome.
And so we competed in one in Nashville, and we didn't know it, but there were producers out in the audience looking for their next filmmaker to helm this $2 million feature that they wanted to shoot in Nashville. And after the whole thing was over, they're like, hey, we want to talk to you. And they offered me my first feature job. And like, once you get in the club, and that you at least pull something off that was decent, which we did,
Right.
it makes it, you kind of made it into that orbit. And so, yeah, that was 2011 when we shot that. It came out in 2012.
Was that the movie Unconditional?
That was Unconditional. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love that movie.
Oh, thanks, dude.
To be honest, like, I told you this, I gave my life to the Lord in 2003, and I came into, I loved grunge music. I loved watching movies. I loved the way that Hollywood did it, because it always drew, like, for me, for many, many years, that was my, I could literally shut off everything in my brain. And for 2 hours, I was focused on a movie, no matter what, like everything else just died, kind of just went away. As a Christian, I was just like, oh my gosh, these movies are horrible, and the music is even worse. And I just felt like, because grunge music for me, I kind of grew up in the 80s, and then grunge came up. And next thing I know, I'm like, oh, I love this, because the lyrics, I was always a lyrics guy, and the lyrics just moved me. Like, even though you couldn't understand half the grunge words that were coming out of Eddie Vedder's mouth or something like that, but, at least I could read the words, back in the day when they had it back on the back of a CD. And they moved me. And And honestly, Unconditional was the first movie that I watched as a Christian that I said, okay, finally somebody's getting that on how to write a movie for the Christian movement, so to speak. And man, I was just really, really moved by that big time.
Thanks, man. Dude, that means a lot to me.
Well,
Really, seriously. I don't feel like anybody saw that movie. So that
oh,
you
dude,
saw
I
it.
did. Well, and on top of that, I had just adopted African American twins. And
Oh, wow.
so it resonated, in my life. Like, I was like, okay, so how do I, as a white father who's been relatively privileged my whole life, take a child, two children, that we got out of foster care system here in St. Louis. How do I teach, number one, how do I teach my son, they're boy, girl twins. And how do I teach my son to be, an outstanding young Black man? And this movie just kind of was touching on, it's not about children, but it is about children, and it was about the couple and the friends. And I was just like, okay, so how do I do this? And that movie came out and it was well done. It's cinematically, it was, good acting, and it just had everything that I thought a movie should have, especially in the Christian genre. And then they've only gotten better since then.
Man, thank you. And thank you for, your podcast is called Man Up God's Way. Dude, that you are an adoptive father, that I have mad respect, man. I just want to encourage you. I know it's probably been some hard times, some beautiful,
God. Yeah.
but yeah, man, I just want to encourage you. I think, man, if everybody manned up in the Christian community that way, man, we'd have a different world. I think,
yeah.
I really lament, and man, I hope I don't cause any offense or step on any toes, but I really lament the like hyper attenuation to the politics of the US right now. I just think we have so much bigger fish to fry. Like
100%.
To see you doing what you're doing in this quiet way, you're changing the world more than anybody can, screaming at some supposed enemy in all caps on Facebook, because they because they have a different political view than you. So anyway, man,
thank you for that.
Oh yeah, I will get off on a massive side quest with you for the rest of the interview. But man, dude, it literally, we just did the last trailer we just did for Jesus Revolution. We purposely put the old hymn from the 60s, "They will know we're Christians by our love."
Right.
Almost like as this call to action. Like no one cares, man. No one cares. Like, but if like we could all get together and shut down foster care in America, can you imagine? Like there would be the greatest Christian like revolution and revival.
I read a statistic not too long ago that said if every church, not every Christian, but if every church adopted 2 kids, we would take care of the foster care system. It would go away. And every church, not every Christian, just if every church, one family out of that would adopt 2 kids, it would take care of the foster care system.
Yeah, man. God help us, because we're preoccupied with all other crap that doesn't matter.
100%.
Because man, if I don't care, I don't really care what your political views are. I have friends on the massive far ultra left and friends on the massive far ultra right. I try to love everybody, even though I don't agree, and I don't always do it well, but I try. That's my tribe. But dude, if we could come together and really, really try to love and make decisions through a filtration of God's love, man, the world would be different. And the actual lens in which people outside Christianity viewed the church would change. The optics would change so dramatically, but it's like you can't get people to wake up to that idea, it seems. And so yeah, like our movie really is this love letter back. It's like, guys, come on, can we just make it about love, and I really feel like it's an important theme for today, because it's really strange, man. But like when I look at Jesus and I look at his life and his ministry and what he did, I don't see how you can pull political hatred out of
Oh,
that.
yeah, exactly. Or racism, or disunity. Like there's so much there that it's
Yeah.
like, okay, the church right now looks like the opposite of Jesus, and
Yeah.
we've got to veer back toward that. Again, I think you can go too far either way. It's not like we condone the sins that are out there, but we love those people through that moment where they can understand who Jesus is, because Jesus is the only one that's going to change them. Our berating or trying to get them to follow a list of rules or religiosity or anything like that's not going to change them. It's only the love of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit that's going to change them, to motivate them to love others, as they learn to love God even more.
That's a good word, man. That's a good word.
That's all. I've been preaching that to so I'm also a pastor, and I've been preaching that to my church all of this year. Like God gave me 2 words this year, and it was friends and neighbors.
Okay.
How do we bridge the gap between the friends that we have out in the world to the church and to Jesus Christ, and how do we go and show mercy to all those that we love? Like the Good Samaritan, and those are our neighbors, not just the people on the left and right. And it's that moment where we put down the guard of religion and show the love of Jesus to everyone that we meet. And I think we need a lot more of that. That's for sure.
Yeah, the Good Samaritan, that's a tough parable, because the people that they're like, he's like, well, so a religious leader walked by, and they're, oh, this is the guy that helps. Oh, and he just saw him walk by, and then but then this ethnic disparaged minority,
right?
Dude, somebody you would never expect, like, the lowest of the low in the Jewish culture. This is the guy that helps him. And man, that was a highly offensive, highly incendiary story at the time. And so he's like, so I ask you, of the 3, who is the real neighbor?
Right.
That's powerful, man. That's
the one who shows mercy. That's the one, and that's where we got to be. So we can't use the church as our beating stick. We have to use the church as the place that we loved on them to Jesus. And
yes,
we got to do more of that.
Yeah, my pet peeve, and I try to be so gentle, because I don't want to be a jerk. My pet peeve is everybody loves to pull Hollywood into the culture wars and talk about how satanic Hollywood is, and how anti-Christ they all are. I'm like, man, they're not against God or Jesus. They're not against Christian movies. They just want to make money. When you figure out Hollywood's God is money, like a lot of Americans' God is,
exactly.
So once you figure that out, it's like you said, if we can keep making stuff that is good, and Hollywood's like, oh, that's actually good quality,
right?
And a lot of people go see it. They're going to let us do more Christian faith-based movies. And so, but yeah, man, it's like everything gets indoctrinated into these, horrible culture wars. And so, yeah, the Good Samaritan would be an ultra right guy falls among thieves and robbers and is beaten within an inch of his life. But this ultra left crazy person comes and helps him. Right. Who's the neighbor?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it's less. He was trying to draw this beautiful, like, polar opposites, like the person you wouldn't expect to helped. Right. And so, and I really want everyone to take a look at their own hearts and lives, because, man, if we're not operating in love, man, there's so many scathing scriptures in the New Testament.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, the Corinthians at the time kind of thought they had it all on lock, and he had to talk to them about like what love was, and like the love chapter, love is patient, love is kind. And then he says, I can speak in ethereal languages that like humans don't even know. I can find those languages, speak in them, but if I don't have love, I'm just noise. I'm useless.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, man, that's the drum that I beat. And to see you like walking it out and living it and preaching it from your pulpit, man, I want to esteem you and encourage you and just value you, because I really think where you're living is the actual next revolution. We've got to get back. I've really had some heartbreaking things, seen some heartbreaking things happen in the last couple of years. But I guess what I would say to any listener, and I know we probably are stepping on some toes, because
all right, it's called Man Up God's Way, dude. We talk about it all.
Yeah, come on, let's man up. No,
Yeah.
um, no, I think that, they're check check it in your conversations, guys and gals. Check what you talk about the most and what you think about
Amen.
the most. Because if you're
That's
talking about it the most and thinking about it the most, it's your idol. And for a lot of people out there, man, it's politics.
God. Yes,
Like
exactly.
if you're talking about the love of God the most,
Yeah,
maybe maybe that's where we need to
right.
be. And so, yeah, check how much energy is flowing into whatever it is you want to talk about and think about the
Mhm.
most, and that's probably an idol in your life. And
The
you should
Bible
get rid
says in the end of times, Jesus isn't going to ask you your political affiliation or how much money you gave. He's going to ask you, who did you bring with you? And did you give water to those who need water and food to those who need food? Like those are the questions he's going to ask. He could care less. And to be honest, he doesn't really care that the United States is who it is, especially if we're not following him and in the way that we are. He's going to take that blessing away from us if we don't get back to him, and it won't matter at that point in time anyway. So
yes.
it's a crazy world what we've done with politics. I agree 100%. So
Yeah, I always try to turn people, like if I see them getting their dander up over politics, I'm like, you realize when Jesus appeared as the Messiah, he was living in occupied Israel. Like Israel was occupied by the
right,
Romans. They were under Roman rule. So he
right,
wasn't like, they're infringing on our rights. He was
right,
like, hey man, you see that soldier? He
right,
has, by law, he has the right to make you carry all of his stuff for a mile because you
right.
are the subjugated people. Right.
Yes,
Instead of walking a mile, take an extra
right.
mile. Just see what they do. Just see what they do. Um,
That's
but like,
good.
I don't know, dude. That's it. People cannot wrap their head around that. It's like, for our freedoms aren't rent. It's like,
Right.
no, dude, man. Jesus came to bring ultimate freedom as a king in a
Yes.
kingdom. So take capitalism and American and nationalism and all your political idolatry, push all that to the side and understand if you really want to follow Jesus, he's your king and you
Yeah.
are subject in that kingdom.
Yeah.
And he commands you to love your
Yeah.
enemies. And man, like when you put up what's in your heart against
Yeah.
that, man, we're failing. We're failing every day.
It's
And it's
also the
beautiful.
difference. It's also the difference between selfishness and selflessness.
Mm,
God wants us to be selfless. Everything that Jesus taught was about selflessness. It wasn't about selfishness. It wasn't about my wants, my needs, or anything like that. It was all about what I could do for others. And when we
yeah.
get to that point in our mindset and in our heart, more importantly, and the world will look a lot different, and so will the church. And I pray that people hear that and realize. I think too many of us always say we have the proverbial mirror in front of us. All I see is me, 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 me. And the moment that I take that down, I can see others. And the goal for Christians is to see others.
Yeah.
We're supposed to take them. It's like, we're talking about the Good Samaritan, the priest and the Levite. All they saw was the law. The law said you can't touch somebody who's dead. You're going to have to spend so much time getting cleansed. And so they took the law above taking care of others. And they missed the point. And I think we do that a lot of times in church as well, is that we forget that we need to be looking and focusing on others. And I do a prayer journal, and I tell people to do a prayer journal as well, because what's cool about it is, I've got a stack of prayer journals, is almost as tall as me for the last 20 years.
Amazing.
And what's cool is I can go back and I can look at my past prayers and I can see, okay, Jody was selfish this day. Like all he prayed was, woe is me, why is me, my checkbook's this, my wife's that, my kids, everything that's bad about me. And then there's moments where I see my prayers like, I'm praying for Brent, I'm praying for the new movie, I'm praying for missionaries, I'm praying for the pastors in the air. Like all of a sudden my prayer life becomes focused on others. And we have to take the proverbial mirror down from our lives and our face and start looking at others so we can show them Jesus. That's showing Jesus the moment that we become selfless in our being.
I love that, man. I love it so much. And yes, he was a servant leader,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So let's jump into some of your movies now. So Unconditional, I said, it really rocked my world. It started coming out. It came out, and some of the other movies were trying to come out. I think oh shoot, I just went brain dead. The other brothers that do, not the Irwin brothers, but
the Kendrick brothers.
Kendrick brothers, yeah. So they came out with, a couple movies that started right about the time that you were coming out, and then you did a couple of documentaries that I thought were out of the park, man. The Steve McQueen documentary that you did, I loved that documentary. I loved how you got
team on that one.
Yeah, how you guys brought that in and just showed how Jesus kind of changed his life. And what I like about all your movies is that they're redemptive stories, and you show restoration that happens in people's lives, and the moment of brokenness. And I've always said this. I think what maybe you and I as believers sometimes, for those who do not believe, who are lost, their rock bottom is way, 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 way down there. Like when we think they hit rock bottom, they've only just gotten to one layer, and then they have to hit complete rock bottom in order to turn around and see Jesus there holding his hand down to help them up. And those redemptive stories are so beautiful when you put them together. And you did Johnny Cash documentary as well. And I always liked Johnny Cash, and you did some good stuff with both of those documentaries. I appreciate those, because you're showing, all we really see sometimes about, Steve McQueen as being a movie icon, but you don't see behind the scenes of the struggles and the demons that were on him until he finally, just kind of gave it all up and started anew, so to speak. And same thing with Johnny Cash. I mean, luckily we got to see his, in the open, because at the end of his life, man, he was all about Jesus and teaching that. So those were great documentaries, big time. I love those.
Yeah, Ben Smallbone directed both of those.
Okay.
Great director.
Right.
And I got to do the score.
So you did the scores on those guys. That's what I was going to ask.
On both of them. Yeah, did the music for both. I actually think maybe the Johnny Cash score is maybe some of my best work. I loved it.
That was good.
I was intimidated, man. I'm like, what? They're asking me to do music about Johnny Cash. I was so intimidated. I was like,
that's awesome.
I'm not good enough to do this. So, but yeah, I really felt like, I was supposed to do it. And they actually gave me a track that had Johnny Cash's voice on it. And I would use little slivers of samples of his voice in places. And it helped me, because I'm like, well, if Johnny's here with me, I can do this.
You can do it. Exactly. Yeah. I bet that was intimidating.
Yeah.
So I guess, is that when you probably met Greg Laurie? Because I know he, on the Steve McQueen, he did the narrating basically on it.
That is correct. That was the first time I met Greg. We took a team to California and we started shooting some of his stuff. And what's crazy about that was, in the meantime, in the middle of all that, shooting his stuff for Steve McQueen, we also sat down with him and Kathy. I mean, I think it was like almost 10 hours, but we did a very, very extensive interview about what really happened to them during the Jesus movement, late 60s.
No kidding.
So John Irwin, who I co-directed with, Jesus Revolution was his passion project, and he was friends with Greg.
Right.
And becoming even deeper friends with him. So I sat with them for those initial interviews, and I was doing research. I was initially the screenwriter for it, and I moved on to do something else. And John Irwin himself and John Gunn actually ended up writing the screenplay off my research that I did. And to throw myself under the bus, I'm really glad I departed, because I think the script that they wrote is awesome. I don't think I would have taken it the direction they did, and it was this beautiful, like, jumping off platform for us. And
it was.
So I'm grateful for how all this shook out. And the movie fell apart a couple times. It fell apart once before the pandemic, once right when the pandemic hit. It was about to be shot in California, and it fell apart. So I ended up, when it came around the third time, I was available, and I read the script. I was like, this is really good, guys. I want to do it. And so I feel really fortunate that unmounted
is
a couple
awesome.
times that I was able to jump on.
That
But
is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, no. So that's John Irwin was in the process of really becoming good friends with Greg, and yeah, that was my first time meeting him when we shot all the stuff for Steve McQueen.
That's
Actually,
awesome.
I actually shot. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, literally.
Right.
Like, and you know the rest of the saying, which is true too. But I I do a lot of things good. You know, I'm not great
Right.
at anything, but I have a stack of things that I'm good
Right.
at. And so yeah, I actually shot some of the shots of Greg and stuff. I shot them. You know, um,
That's great.
so
That
yeah,
is great.
I was on the
Two-
initial teams before I started scoring. I was on the some of the teams that were doing interviews and shooting stuff for it.
Wow,
So
that's great. It's crazy that you would think, because the Steve McQueen, what did it come out in mid 2015 or something like that, or was it
yes, that
a
would have
little
been
later?
right after. That was right after Woodlawn. So you're right. Yep.
Okay. And then and so I met Greg in 2010 in Hawaii. I didn't even know who he was. I'd taken my family out there. And it was my wife and I's anniversary, but we took the whole family because probably one and only time we'll ever go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
But we were on Maui, and we decided that we were going to go to church on Sunday because we don't like missing church, and so we decided to go out to a church, and we found this little pavilion church overlooking the ocean. It was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever seen in my life, and I get there, and man, there's like 400 or 500 people, under the pavilion, and then standing out, in this is a beautiful area over the ocean. And there's Greg Laurie sitting there preaching in this church, and I'd never heard of him before. And all of a sudden, I Google him or whatever. After that, I was like, holy cow, this is a big pastor, and here we got to watch him here in Hawaii. So that was pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah,
He's a good dude, man.
Yeah, he is. He is a good dude. So then you did I Can Only Imagine.
Yeah. Me and John and Andy, the Irwin brothers, we had a really good experience on Woodlawn together.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, well, I forgot about Woodlawn. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's a really good movie too.
Oh, thanks, dude. Well, we all just we all vibed out, man. Like we just, I fit in really well into Andy's world. He likes working with actors and the editing and the music, and I do all that. And John is a DP by trade and shoots really pretty pictures. And I love photography. I love shooting stuff. And he's also a writer, which I love writing too. So I kind of fit in with both the boys, and I could kind of play on either side of the playground, with them. And you need a lot of support and help. And it just worked really well on Woodlawn. So we doubled down on Imagine. I mean, I did so much stuff on that movie, but I wrote it with John. I edited it with Andy. I scored all the music. I helped produce all of the bands, all the Mercy Me stuff. And I was the second unit director on Imagine too.
Wow.
So yeah, it was fun, man. I got to wear a lot of hats, that's me, that's what makes me happy.
Yeah.
I love doing that. And they gave me a cameo. I was actually the piano player at the end in the big concert.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. On my hands, you can actually see if you watch the movie now, that's my tattoo. That's my wedding tattoo. But you see the tattoo on my fingers, So and it was intimidating because that piano part, it's real pretty and everything, but it's actually really tricky to play it like exactly how the dude played it on the record. I mean, I was okay, I don't want to mess this up. I'll be judged for this forever, So I feel like I played the part right. So
that's awesome. So we had Bart come into our church right before the movie started, and he did when it was going out to the to the theaters, or actually to the churches, really, to do pre-screenings. We have Six Flags literally 500 yards from our church here in St. Louis. And so he was doing a concert at Six Flags. So he came here and they did a video shoot at our church to do it was just him telling what the movie was all about at the very beginning of the pre-screenings. And so that was really cool to have him here to do that.
So they use your church as like the background for
exactly. Yeah, they came into the sanctuary and we cleaned it out, and they used the stage, and we've got a pretty cool cool backdrop. So he used that and did that. And so that movie wrecked my world too, because, and to be honest, that was the first Christian song that my wife and I had ever heard that was just one of those moments. We hadn't been saved long, and we heard that driving down the car, and it was like, we're Christians and we're going to be in heaven and we're going to see Jesus one day. And then, you know, that whole song was kind of like that. And it was just like, oh my gosh, okay, now I know why we're doing what we're doing. And it was just kind of that song just kind of, and then the movie comes out and it's like, oh my goodness, it was just that movie got me in the feels big time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Man, I feel really fortunate to work with John and Andy, because there's something really strange that happens with our work. Is I kind of set out to make a different movie than they do, and we both make our version of the film together, and that film ends up being something that converges into the one movie. But like the thing I've struggled with my whole life, and it's definitely been like my weakness, is man, I don't know what it is, but it's my natural wiring to hold grudges and to really have a lot of unforgiveness in my heart and become bitter and resentful over time. And I've really been working on myself. I made it a spiritual priority just to try to purge that, you know, from my life. But man, I was just realizing how much I needed to forgive. And so all that stuff with Bart forgiving his dad, that was me working through my issues. So like a lot of people see, yeah, they're like, wow, you know, they definitely have like a moment with their faith and with Jesus. They're like, oh, when I die, everything's good. But then there's other people that come to me, he's like, man, I had a terrible relationship with my dad.
right.
He died before I could tell him I loved him, or I forgave him. And man, you know, so it's really cool. It's really cool when people from different, like kind of coming from different corners, maybe of the same room, you know, come together. But yeah, I was definitely working through.
Yeah, I could imagine, like, it's almost like, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
I'm working through my own stuff, and those themes are coming out in the film as John and Andy's themes are coming out, and somehow they blend together and, you know, become a cohesive movie, you know.
Especially if you're writing the script and you're directing it, it's almost hard to, you know, not practice what you preach, you know, so to speak. It's like, you know, standing on the pulpit and preaching something that you don't necessarily do, but you expect the church to do. And then as you're writing these out, you know, there's a lot of forgiveness. There's a lot of redemption. I just love the movies that you've been involved with, because there's this redemptive process. And that's what the gospel is all about, is redemption, you know, coming from the dead man that you are to the live man walking through Jesus Christ. And we all have that ability and availability in and through his love, mercy, and grace. And when you do that, I could imagine that all of a sudden you're probably writing it or watching it being played out by the actors, and the next thing you're going, man, I need to forgive, blah, 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 you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, probably one of the most personal, intimate stories in my filmmaking is I remember scoring that scene when Bart chooses to forgive his dad, and he goes and finds his journal, and he carries his dad upstairs and puts him to bed. And I remember I'm scoring it, and I'm on one of my keyboards, and tears are just coming down my face and hitting the keyboard, and like all over my hands while I was playing this, because I just felt the power of God, man, like, and challenging me that I needed to forgive. And it was just even watching this character forgive his dad, even though I'd written, you know, helped write that scene and all that stuff, and I'm scoring it now, and you know, edited it and all that. It still was like washing over me as like a call to go deeper and to forgive, love more. And
Praise God.
and I'm not there yet, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely a lot further down the road for sure.
I always say unforgiveness is like drinking acid and hoping the other person dies.
That is very
You know,
true.
it just ends up eating you alive, and half the time that person hasn't even thought twice about it. So that forgiveness is not about the other person, it's about you. It's, you know, it's you getting to that place of forgiveness, whether you were righted or wronged. you've got to make sure that, and even the Lord's Prayer, forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive others. Do we really want God to forgive us like we forgive others? Yeah, we do. But if he does it at the same measure, we're kind of screwed sometimes.
Yeah. No, the parable that freaks me out is and it's about forgiveness and like holding grudges, but it's like the dude begs the guy that he owes 10 grand to. He's like, please, I don't have the money. And he's like, all right, okay, I'm gonna let you off. Then he goes, and then that guy goes and finds the dude that owes him $20 and like shakes him down. He's like, I'm gonna throw you in prison,
Right.
It's like, oh man, dude, so of if you've been forgiven a lot in your life, which we know we have,
Yes.
you have to become a conduit and a channel for that forgiveness to flow. And like this guy literally did not get he did not get the memo. He just got 10 grand forgiven, and he shakes the dude down for $5 or whatever it was. I don't know the actual monetary values, but it holds true. He's like,
amen,
where's my money?
Amen. So let's jump into the Jesus Revolution. I got to see this movie. Actually, we had our church watch it. A good buddy of mine, Jason Noble. I don't know if you know Jason.
I love Jason. He's a dear friend. Amazing guy. Amazing.
Yeah, he
can't say good stuff about him.
So we hooked up years ago. I've done quite a few movies with him through our Man Up ministry. We have over 1 million followers on social media, and so we do a lot of advertising and promotion. And I've had the privilege to write devotions for Indivisible, a movie about marriage, military deals. I got to write a devotional for Hacksaw Ridge. So they did almost an underground, movement to the church and went secular with the movie. So it was we did a men's devotion for that. And I got to write that, but I did all that through Jason. So I just want to give him a shout out, but he also gave us the movie to watch. We were the first church to be able to see it outside of Greg Laurie's church a few months back. And my first words out of my mouth were this is going to do what the Passion of Christ did.
Whoa.
This movie is going to change lives. Like the Passion of Christ, people were in the movie theaters just crying and blubbering and giving their lives to the Lord and just couldn't believe what they had just seen. And I thought that of the Jesus Revolution, because I think we're at a moment in time where there's no hope whatsoever. It just feels like there's no hope whatsoever. The kids aren't getting their hope from social media. They aren't getting it from TikTok. They aren't getting it from their parents a lot of times. They're not getting it from the school system, and they're definitely not getting it from our government, but they can get it through Jesus. And I think this movie, in a really weird way, portrays, what the hippies were going through back in the, late 60s, early 70s, to what the kids are going through nowadays. Like, man, I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 69. I grew up in the 80s, 70s and 80s. Man, those were pristine times, to be honest. There wasn't a whole lot of bad things happening. 90s, pretty easy. 90s were pretty easy. And then all of a sudden, you get into the mid 2000s and a little bit later, and it just kind of all hell breaks loose. And so I really think this movie is coming out in a time that is going to do what it did back in the 70s. But I also think it's going to do exactly what the Passion of Christ did, and just change hearts.
I really hope that's the case. And I really do hope a lot of young kids go see it, because we do have an identity crisis. I think we probably have an identity crisis in mine and your generation. It's just there's just this malaise that's kind of settled over the planet, and it's really troubling, man. It's definitely the darkest, saddest times I've ever lived in. And it's so crazy because my kids are obsessed with the 80s. Like, I raised them on 80s and like 80s movies, and like I'm so nostalgic for the 80s. And like they're like, Dad, was the 80s really as cool as like it feels, with the movies and the music? I was like, it was amazing, So it was just like an amazing decade, and like their eyes get so bright, when I talk about the 80s. But what's sad is that's not the decade in which we live. Like the decade in which you live should be the most awesome, right? And so we definitely have an identity crisis. I personally think, to go back to some of your story and your testimony, man, I think if the church turned back towards justice and social equity, and like really trying to work to lift people that are having a hard time, I think the young kids would turn turn more to the church. But like they look at the
Right.
church and like, well, if that's what Jesus is about, like what all these church people are doing, I'm
Right.
out. And
Yeah.
it's really sad because it's like it's like this really imperfect canister around Jesus that we've constructed in our culture. And so they look at this canister and they're like, well, if that's what it is, I don't want it. I don't want it. And I've heard so many stories like that. I've had guys in the marketing team tell me that, you know, pastors are like, their kids don't even want to go to church, but then
Right.
they expel Jesus Revolution and they're like, if that's what Christianity can be, if that's what Jesus is, I'm in. I'm in. But if it's like what I see at your church, Dad, I'm out. You know,
Right.
so there's just this huge disconnect. And I think I don't know, man. Again, at the risk of offense or making an incendiary comment, I think in some ways the kids are right. You know, until like the church turns back to the general tenets of Jesus: love, acceptance, compassion, empathy, belonging, mercy. We're just it's almost like they're creating a PR problem.
Right. Well, also they've got to realize that, you know, you can't have Jesus without change. You know, the issue I think with a lot of young people is they think that they can come in to meet Jesus and never change. You know, there has to be a new creation for those who believe in Jesus Christ. And if there's not, is it true salvation? And I think that's where I think a lot of people, because there is this change that happens whether you want it to or not, especially if you truly believe in Jesus. The Holy Spirit's going to indwell and take up residence. The next thing you know, he's going to start moving around and things are going to change in your life. Nor can the church condone what is happening, but we can love them through that as well.
Well, you're right. I think once you get into a spiritual relationship, you're gonna want to change. You're gonna be like, oh, like for me, like
Right.
this grudge, this resentment that I have, I want that out. It's causing me suffering and pain, and it's not. Yeah, I don't believe it's from the Spirit. You know, so there are
Right.
things in your life that are naturally broken, maybe because of your family of origin or how your circuitry is wired, or you know, because of the ways that I'm selfish or whatever. But when you get into a spiritual journey, you're going to want those things to change because you know there's like freedom on the other side of
Right.
those.
Amen.
So yeah, man, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I always, I tell people all the time, sin is fun. That's the problem with sin, is that it's fun, but it usually takes you to a place that you never wanted to go to begin with. And it usually ends up what you thought was going to be a season becomes a lifelong issue and problem. And so Jesus will take care of that. Jesus will give you, take away the burden and the bondage that happens with sin and give you the freedom that you're looking for. And we need more people to realize that.
Awesome.
And honestly, man, I'm telling you what, this movie, I've seen it twice now.
Okay.
And I am impressed with it. It's well done. It's got a great story. It's got, the redemptive story, but it also has, not everybody finishes well, sometimes through this stuff. And I think it's cool because you see some of the issues that go behind the scenes in a church. You've got an older church, all of a sudden you got a newer guy preaching the gospel who's got his own struggles. I mean, if you know the story of Lonnie, it's kind of it's a sad and a glad story all in one. And then Chuck Smith is the other guy, and I think those two generations melding together is, I think, what's happening right now in the United States, especially, and really all around the world, because children, and I'll say children, anybody under 18 years old have a connection with each other that's on social media, but it's not in a personal relationship with, it's not even a personal relationship with each other. They think all their friends are on social media, and so they're disconnected in a way. And I think this movie will hopefully bring that connection back together and make people realize, man, we need each other. We need to get together.
Yeah. Did you see Wall-E, the little robot movie, the Pixar?
Yeah, I tell people that's 100% where we are.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Literally, they wouldn't even look each other in the eye. They'd be having a conversation with the person next to them, and they'd be on their screen talking to that person on a screen.
Yes.
Until, the robots kind of reminded everybody that oh no, you actually have a soul. You actually need Like they were the most human things in the film. It was beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful
it was.
poetry. It was a piece of spiritual poetry to me. But yeah, man. Yeah, there's so much suffering and sadness. I've seen it, in my own kids, in their in their interactions with social media.
Hmm.
And I mean, dude, I have a meager farm here in Tennessee, and some of my happiest days is I'll purposely leave my phone in the house and go down and tend to my animals, and
Yes,
and and you get back, but it's so funny. You get back, where were you? I was trying to call you. Oh, I put my phone down. You know.
that's great. You're right, exactly.
So yeah, man, like just to and the Matrix has all of us to a degree. Like when I wake
It
up,
does.
the first thing I reach for is my phone. I
It
need,
does.
if anything broke in the middle of the night or someone's trying to text me, or what's on fire on my email, like that's the first thing I reach for. So I can't be I can't be judgmental or condemn, because I'm in the
Right.
same, I'm caught in the same thing. But
I have what's
yeah,
called the red dot syndrome. Like if there's a red notification on any of my apps, I gotta check it. Like every now and then I lean over here and I've got all these red dots, and they're like, oh my gosh, I gotta touch it.
yeah,
Just a
yeah.
little bit, but yeah,
But man, there's a freedom from setting all that stuff aside, and man,
amen.
but yeah, dude, it's definitely an addiction. It's definitely something that I feel like when I wake up in the morning, there's this tension until
Mm,
I grab my phone and look at it, and I wish it was different. I want it to be different, and I'm
right,
working on it. I literally, I think I'm going to work even harder this year of purposefully
right.
putting my phone away from me
Amen.
for blocks of time.
Amen. That's good. Well,
So
I'll join you on that, because I
okay.
look at I have an iPhone, and you can swipe right on the home screen. All of a sudden, you can see how many hours you've used your phone and what apps you've used, and that sometimes makes my stomach hurt. So
Oof. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. So Jesus Revolution comes out February 22nd. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Next month?
that's kind of a pre-screening for all like the insider
Okay.
people. There's some
Got it.
bonus content. We did like these really cool interviews with Ann Wilson, and I think Greg Laurie does like a little bit of a
Awesome.
meet and greet with everybody. So that's 22nd if you want to catch all that bonus content. But technically the street date is the 24th, which is that Friday.
24th. Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah.
And
So yeah, either is great. But yeah, the official street date from Lionsgate is the 24th of February, Friday. But you can catch it 2 days early and see all the bonus content. I'm in a few of the interviews. It was fun. Me and Ann Wilson and Kevin Downs, the main producer, and the other director, John Irwin. So we just had a little bit of have a
that's
chat
great.
with Ann, and she wrote a beautiful song for the movie. And then yeah, Greg's gonna, I think, give like a little 10-minute meet
Yeah.
and greet.
I had never heard of her until Ann Wilson. I hadn't heard of her until I heard the song in the movie, but I didn't know who she was. And then we went to Winter Jam last weekend with my kids, and there she was singing. It's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's
Did
cool.
you do the tune from the movie?
Yeah, she did that. She totally did the movie, and they promoted it. It was a big promotion too for Winter Jam, man. It was huge. They had this, I bet it was a 60-foot screen that was probably 60 by, I was just probably 60 by 60. And all Jesus Revolution was all over that screen, man. It was cool.
That's so cool.
It's
That's
cool.
so
So I do. I think this movie's gonna rock the nation to an extent. I do believe it's going to be like the Passion of Christ. I believe it's going to change hearts. And I want to encourage everybody to go see this movie. Again, for our listeners, if you want great quality content like Brent and the Irwin brothers are doing, man, I'm telling you what, go out and spend your money, good money, on these movies. And I promise you, just like he said earlier, Hollywood will see this and they're like, all right, we want more. Lionsgate has. I mean, they've actually got a whole division for faith-based movies, and it's really good. And so, man, if we want good quality movies, keep going to the movies to see it. Don't wait for it just to come out on streaming. Go see it while it's at the movies. So what else? Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
well, you're exactly right. Thank you. I think that's a big educational piece that we're kind of missing. But like, it's so like the industry is so driven by box office, and I would say to the viewers that are like on the bubble about whether they want to go, this movie is, it's really it's really big in scope, and it feels really great on a big screen, and it's really funny. It's really funny. It gets intense at times. The sound is really great. The look of it's really great. So it's definitely going to be one that you wouldn't be sorry that you saw on the big screen, and it really does help. It's like voting. You're like voting for more of this content, and yeah, and it's just not the same if you wait till streaming. Like really, the strongest vote that you can send to the studios in Hollywood and everything is, especially opening weekend. But yeah, so if you guys would come help us out on opening weekend, that would be great. But yeah, man, thank you for the kind words. It's a movie that's very dear to my heart, and I cry in spots every time I watch it. It just,
I do too. Yeah.
Back, I've worked on it, seen it 1,000 times, but there's just a few places that are just so emotionally vulnerable and honest. It still gets me. So yeah,
that's
man,
awesome.
I love the movie. I would love for everybody to see it, and it's entertaining and fun, but it's more than that. It says a lot of important things, I think, that our culture needs right now. Yeah,
Even a lot of the Christian movies that come out really, they sometimes they almost dance around the gospel. It's really good. I mean, the message is great, the content's good, really good, but sometimes it's just almost like this did not. I mean, y'all went straight to the gospel, and I loved, just how it made you feel. I mean, you had people searching and seeking, and it was through Jesus and Jesus Christ alone, and that's how they found their hope. And it's a great message. So I appreciate that.
yeah, man, thank you. It was cool because the gospel, even on the humanist side of the film, you're just telling the story about the people. The gospel was so ingrained in what they were going through. It was really it was really organic to the story and fun to put it in there. I do sympathize though, like when it's tough because like sometimes in Christian movies it can be the opposite, where it's like, oh well, how do we shoehorn in the little spiel, to make this a Christian movie? So I love just how organic it was to the story. Like you're not having to go, well, how do we you're not having like media. It's just like in the story. And I thought that was really cool. And, for someone who's even not a Christian or an atheist or whatever, like it's not going to be something that's like, oh well, you can tell they had a corporate meeting about how to put it in there. It's like, no, it's just like endemic. It's like baked into the story. And I don't know, man. I think it's pretty cool. So
I do too. I that's what I like about the storytelling. I mean, it's literally talking, through the people's lives, and then, you just see how Jesus is sprinkled in all the way through that. And it just brings the whole message together, and everybody, is just kind of like, I love the way Chuck Smith was like, only if Jesus walks through my door or will I ever have a hippie, in my church or anything like that. And the next thing you know, he walks in. So I appreciate all that you've done. It's a really good thing. So what do you have for the future? You got anything that the audience needs to know, or is it all secretive right now?
That's
or are you just taking a break?
Oh no, that's funny. That's a true story, by the way. He really said that. And he really said, they need to take a bath and they can't be helped. And if God brings a hippie to me, I'll talk, and that all that is true. That really happens. So, pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, for me, we're waiting to see. I mean, honestly, guys, I'm being truthful, like we're waiting to see what Jesus Revolution does, because if it does really, really well at box, it's going to open up a lot more opportunities. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern. Andy, one of the brothers, is working on a Navy SEAL movie that is really powerful. And I think the movie's gonna be huge. And then John is working on a kind of like a companion piece to The Chosen, but it's called House of David. And it literally is like almost like a 300 meets The Chosen version of the life of David, just a no holds barred, very, very intense, look at the life of David. That would kind of fit in this, like they're, like kind of a cinematic universe of Bible stories. So that's pretty cool. As for me, I'm I took the advice of the main producer, like, man, let's just wait and see what Jesus Revolution does. So I'm just going to take a few assignments and just lay low. And yeah, you'll probably hear from me in another year. I'm a strange kid, man. I'm like you. I love Hollywood, man. So like
Right.
a lot of my ideas that even deal with spiritual themes, they're sci-fi, they're fantasy, they're thriller, even horror type stuff. But like they ultimately say something important. So I'm hoping that there's room for me to do some genre-based stuff with faith, and they know that's what I want to do. So they're looking for stuff
Right.
for me. I'm looking for stuff as well. So I've got some pretty crazy ideas. I have a sci-fi pilot that's out right now that's getting a lot of traction. So who knows, man? I don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, I really do feel like similar to you. I think Jesus Revolution is going to resonate with a lot of people,
Yeah.
and hopefully spark a lot of really important conversations
Praise
about
God.
love, man.
Right.
Honestly, that was the biggest theme I brought to it. It's just I really want people to wake up to the fact that many of us in the Christian space, we need to reattenuate our hearts back
Right.
to love of Jesus. So
I love that.
yeah. Hey, really quick, while I got you on, tell me what is. Can you just give me like the 1 or 2 minute version? What is Man Up God's Way? What does that mean to you? Like what's the driving principles and force behind what you're doing?
So when I first got into church, I came in as a drunk, as a drug addict. I shouldn't say drug addict. I was doing drugs. I was kind of like your weekend drunk, weekend drug guy, and worked throughout the week. And then all of a sudden, I give my life to the Lord, and Jesus is working in my life, and things just start falling away. The sin that's in my life, the worry, the doubt, all this. And I'm reading my Bible, and it's the first book that I've ever read in my life. I never read a book through high school, college. I grew up with Cliff Notes. I'm reading the Bible, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to look around the church, and I'm thinking, the guys in this church right now do not look anything like the Bible. I see guys that are here that are in the Bible that are they're bold, they're authentic, they're fallible, and Jesus keeps using them. And then I look around the church and I'm thinking, man, these look like the guys that I used to beat up in the bars all the time because I like to fight. And back in those days, I'm too old now to fight. I don't even know if I could anymore, but I just was looking around and I thought, man, in my day, if you called somebody a sissy, it was pretty derogatory term. It's like, you don't want to be a sissy, whether it was jumping over a creek or getting in a fight. If somebody called you a sissy, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to cower down and walk away, or you're going to stand up to the challenge. Even if you broke an ankle jumping over a creek, you weren't going to let somebody call you a sissy. And for some reason in my mind, I kept having this thought. I'm thinking, man, there's a bunch of spiritual sissies in the church. And God's looking down. He's like, man, I gave you my word. I gave you my son. I gave you the Holy Spirit. What are you doing? Like, why are you not doing the things that I've called you to do? And so he gave me a passion to disciple men. And what I realized was, men who were in the church had not ever been discipled. And the statistics for most churches anyway, as far as men even going to church, it looked like to me we had feminized the church so much that men didn't even want to come to church anymore. And if they did, they were being led by the collar by their wives. And I always say they had their testicles in their wife's purse, and anytime they needed to use them, they had to ask for it to begin with. So it's a little bit, it was just like all of a sudden I'm thinking, man, God used these manly guys. And I'm not talking about just masculinity, but they were man enough that they would humble themselves to allow God to use them for his purpose. And we just didn't have enough of that in the church. And that's how Man Up God's Way became. I wrote my first book. It's 7 areas in a Christian man's life where they need to man up God's way. It's a personal relationship with Jesus. What I realized was, just like most men, they'd never read the Bible. They had never prayed. They'd never spent time in repentance. And I teach them how to do that as a personal relationship with Jesus. First of all, you need to know that you know Jesus. The second is marriage. We don't have enough men that are spiritual heads of the household in their relationship with their wives. They typically will work, bring home the bacon, and that's about all they do. And then the third area is children. You know, a lot of husbands will become really good fathers, but they bypass the marriage. And then sometimes they just don't become very good at either one. And so really teach those three things to begin with, because once you have your household in order, then you can serve in the church. That's the fourth area. And then at work, what do you look like at work? Do you raise holy hands on Sunday or raise holy hell on Monday? That's not the vision of Jesus or us being the light of the church and or the salt of the earth in our work. And then the last two areas are accountability. You know, men need accountability in their lives, and in order to, you know, to share, to confess their burdens and their sins with each other, and to confess to one another. And then the last area is discipleship. In 2015, I spoke to over 5,000 men through conferences. And I don't know why I did this poll, but I just did a hand-raising poll in the church and then the conference centers that I went to. And I asked, how many people here, and I explained to them Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy. Like, we all need to be a Paul. We need a Barnabas who's an encourager, Ananias who's an encourager coming into our lives. And then we also need a Timothy and Titus, you know, that we actually pass that information on, that we're discipling as well. So shouldn't be a time in your life that you're either not being discipled or you're not discipling somebody else. We all should be a Paul. And out of 5,000 men, 189 guys raised their hand over that 2015 year that actually were either being discipled or discipling. And so that's really our motive. That was a little bit longer than you probably asked for, but that's the whole motive behind Man Up God's Way, is that we encourage men to become the men that God has called them to be, to humbly lower themselves spiritually, even if it's humbly physically, getting on your knees or getting on your face and crying out to God to change you. And then we come alongside of them and help them do that. And that's it.
I love it, man. That's awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, it's great. The crazy conversations that are being having in our culture today, sorry, I didn't say that right. Maybe we can edit that. The crazy things that are happening in our culture today around conversations dealing with toxic masculinity are really fascinating to me.
Right.
Because I'm like you, man. I loved martial arts, dude. I loved, it was so funny. One guy, he was a chiropractor where I used to take martial arts, but he would get punched in the nose a lot, and he got tired of his nose getting broken. So he started wearing this cage. And the martial arts that we did, you weren't supposed to hit in the face. He would accidentally get hit.
Right.
But he got his nose broke a couple times. So he started wearing this cage. But if you wear a cage, you can go to the face. And I love fighting that guy because I love punching the face. But man, I mean, there's a masculine side of us, right? The sports and the fighting and the martial arts. Like, a lot of us, we want to get that out of our system, and we just have that as an energy in our lives. But that can go toxic really fast. And the thing I love about the Christian faith is, like, you lead on your knees, or you lead on your face, you lead washing feet, you know what I mean? Lead serving. And so, well, that's not manly. I want to be the king of the pile. I want to be the leader. I want to be like the kid at the top of the jungle gym that everybody else has to do what they say. Well, that's, the upside down kingdom of Christ is actually like, no, to be first, you got to be last, and so I love this idea of, like, you can still have masculine energy flowing in your life, but you can use that to great effect and powerful effect to be a leader and to serve and to teach. But yeah, I think right now our culture has this really toxic view of, like you were saying, like it all revolves around masculine energy, and that's there's a lot more to being a good man than just energy, like wanting to spar with people and fight.
Right.
It'd be fun, man, dude. I would love to put some pads on and, like, just have it out with some people. That'd be so fun. I mean, I love that stuff, but that doesn't define me and, like, how I want to be treated or how I want to treat others either. So I don't know if you're familiar with Jason Wilson's work at all. Are you familiar?
Yeah. I've actually sent him a few emails trying to get him on the podcast. So I'm hoping one of these days he will. I love his work. Like, he's bringing in masculinity, also respect to these young men. Man, it's great.
Because he's 1,000% masculine. You would not want to meet that guy in a dark alley. He's going to cut you in half.
Right.
But but then he writes a book, Cry Like a Man. Like he understands there's been this disconnect of like, if it's just masculine energy, if it's just that, you're gonna fail and you're gonna end up being a very, very toxic human being.
Right.
But if you take that masculine energy and you bring it into like what God's view of that is, and you're still vulnerable and you're transparent and you're servant and you're in touch with your emotions,
Right.
So anyway, I'm a huge fan of his work, and I definitely see some overlaps. I could see why you would want to speak with him. I'll DM him as well. I don't know him, but I'll be like, hey man, you really need to get on this podcast.
Oh man, I would be honored. I appreciate that. Yeah. I just have a heart for men that, because I just feel like along with the world, their lives are just putting them in a place to where they're not it all begins with Jesus. And if they get that right, everything else is going to filter into a godly life. And that's what we want, guys. It's man up God's way. It's not man up Jody's way. It's not man up the church's way. It's God's way. And God's got a plan. He's given us his word. All we have to do is start reading that, and we can see some resemblance or some semblance of what it means to be a godly man. And every man that you look in the Bible that was written about, they all had flaws, and God used them even in their weaknesses. And I think a lot of times we allow those weaknesses in our own life to hinder us from actually stepping out and doing what God has called us to do. Yeah. And we've got a lot of spiritual, immature, still on the milk of the word kind of guys that haven't stepped into their biblical masculinity yet. And it breaks my heart. We actually have a conference coming up March 31st through April 2nd. It's called Ignite the Fight, Restoring Biblical Masculinity. And really excited about that. So hopefully we'll be able to reach some more guys for that. But yeah, I would appreciate an introduction. That would be awesome. And let me send you one of my books. I'd love to. What's your actually, and I'll cut this out just so you know. I won't put your address on the million people that we're going to send this out to. I'd love to send you a book. What's your address? But man, brother, it's been great to connect with you. Seriously. I'll be praying for you quite often. I love your heart and passion for both music and movies, and keep doing it well and in excellence. I appreciate that.
Thanks, man. If you're ever through Nashville, if you want to get manly with me, we can go get in my bees.
Yeah,
that'll make a man out of you really fast. Ooh.
That is manly. Holy cow.
You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org.